The morning mist hung thick over the Amazon basin as Commander Thexval studied the holographic display floating before his compound eyes. The crimson-skinned Zephyrian officer's mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he watched the deployment patterns of his strike teams across the green expanse below. 47 of the galaxy's most elite warriors had descended into Earth's most unforgiving terrain, armed with technology that could level cities and shields that could deflect plasma cannons. The humans call this place the Green Hell, Thexval mused to his second-in-command, a hulking Corvin whose exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian. How fitting that it will become their tomb. Lieutenant Gorthack's vocal sacs inflated with what passed for laughter among his kind. Their primitive weapons cannot penetrate our battle armor, Commander. This will be over before the next sunrise. 3 months earlier, humanity had rejected the Galactic Consortium's final ultimatum. Surrender Earth's resources and submit to colonial rule or face systematic extermination. The human representative, a gray-haired woman named Director Sarah Chun, had stood before the assembled alien council and spoken words that still echoed through the command ship's databanks. Humanity chooses to stand. We will not kneel, we will not surrender, and we will not go quietly into the night you offer us. The consortium had laughed. How could a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel hope to resist the combined might of 12 advanced civilizations? Their projectile weapons were crude, their armor laughable, and their military doctrine seemed to revolve around the primitive concept of individual soldiers making a difference on a battlefield dominated by technology. But as the strike teams descended into the jungle canopy, something else descended with them. Something the aliens' advanced sensors couldn't detect because it wasn't technology at all. It was a man named Jackson Reeves, though the records had long since erased his name from official documentation. In the halls of the Pentagon, he was simply referred to as the Ghost. In the jungles of Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, and a dozen other conflicts, he had been a shadow that ended threats before they knew they existed. Jackson had been tracking through the Amazon for 6 days when the first alien pods crashed through the canopy. He watched from a hide he'd constructed 800 meters away, studying the newcomers through optics that were decidedly low-tech compared to alien standards, but infinitely more reliable in the electromagnetic chaos of the rainforest. The aliens moved with military precision, but they moved like soldiers who had never faced an enemy that refused to stand and fight in the open. Each alien warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, encased in powered armor that shimmered with energy fields. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained power, and their movement spoke of enhanced strength and speed. But they also moved with the confidence of beings who had never faced an enemy that could kill them from a distance they couldn't even detect. Jackson settled into his rifle, a weapon that would have been considered ancient by galactic standards. It was a .338 Lapua Magnum, hand-loaded ammunition, with a scope that relied on simple magnification rather than computer targeting. No electronics to be detected, no energy signature to betray his position, just precisely machined metal and the accumulated skill of 2 decades of warfare. The first alien team leader paused at the edge of a clearing, his multiple eyes scanning for threats. Through his scope, Jackson could see the creature's head turn in a pattern that suggested enhanced sensory equipment. The alien was clearly receiving data from sources beyond normal sight and sound, analyzing the environment through technological superiority. Jackson's finger found the trigger. He had studied the alien anatomy files that Director Chun had somehow acquired during the diplomatic negotiations. The files were incomplete, but they suggested that despite their advanced armor, certain vulnerable points existed where protection was necessarily limited to allow for joint movement and sensory input. The rifle spoke once, a sharp crack that echoed through the jungle before being swallowed by the ambient noise of 1 million insects and birds. 800 meters away, the alien team leader's head snapped back as the precisely placed round found the gap between helmet and chest armor, where flexible material was necessary for neck movement. The other aliens immediately went into defensive positions, their weapons swinging in wide arcs as they searched for a threat they couldn't identify. Their scanners showed no energy signatures, no technological emanations, nothing that registered as a weapon or a warrior by their understanding of warfare. Jackson was already moving. The first rule of sniping was that you never took two shots from the same position. He flowed through the jungle like water, his movements economical and silent, each step planned to avoid the noise that would betray his position. Behind him, the aliens were beginning to comprehend that they faced something unprecedented. Contact report. Gordhack's voice crackled through the comm system aboard the command ship. Team 7 reports casualties. Team leader down, cause unknown. Fexval's mandibles spread in confusion. Unknown? How can a cause be unknown? Their armor should record all impact data. Sir, the armor shows a projectile impact, but the scanners detect no enemy weapons in the area. The shot appears to have come from empty jungle. On the ground, Team 7 had formed a defensive perimeter around their fallen leader. The alien warriors were impressive specimens, each one a veteran of multiple campaigns across the galaxy. They had faced energy weapons, plasma cannons, particle beams, and explosive devices that could vaporize a city block. But they had never faced an enemy who relied on kinetic projectiles delivered from beyond their detection range. Sergeant Vextar, now in command of the team, activated his enhanced vision systems. The jungle exploded into a display of data streams as his armor analyzed heat signatures, movement patterns, electromagnetic emissions, and chemical traces. The system was capable of tracking a single organism through a crowd of thousands, of detecting the slightest technological emanation from kilometers away. The system showed him trees, insects, birds, and the background electromagnetic noise of a living ecosystem. No humans, no weapons, no threats. Jackson had covered nearly a kilometer before settling into his second position. This one offered a clear line of sight to where 3 alien teams were converging on Team 7's location. He studied the aliens through his scope, noting how their formation suggested they expected threats from their front and flanks, but not from the elevated position he had chosen in the canopy of a massive Cecropia tree. The second shot took down an alien from Team 3, the bullet punching through the creature's armored torso at a joint where protection was reduced to allow for arm movement. The alien dropped without a sound, his weapon discharging harmlessly into the ground as his nervous system shut down. This time, the aliens reacted faster. Energy weapons swiveled toward the general direction of the shot, unleashing bursts of superheated plasma that turned trees into explosive clouds of steam and splinters. The display of firepower was impressive, and it completely missed Jackson by nearly 200 meters. As the aliens saturated his former position with enough energy to melt a tank, Jackson was already moving to his third hide. He paused only long enough to transmit a brief burst communication to his handler, a simple numeric code that would tell Earth's military exactly what they were facing. Aboard the command ship, Fexval stared at the tactical display with growing unease. 2 of his warriors were down, and his teams had found nothing to shoot at in return. Worse, the humans appeared to be using some kind of cloaking technology that his sensors couldn't penetrate. Deploy the tracker drones, he ordered. Saturate the area with surveillance. I want every square meter under constant observation. The drones descended like a swarm of metal insects, their sensors probing every shadow and analyzing every movement. They found birds, mammals, insects, and countless other forms of life. What they didn't find was the human sniper who lay motionless beneath a fallen log, covered in vegetation and mud, breathing through a reed while the mechanical hunters passed overhead. Jackson waited. Patience was perhaps the most important skill a sniper could possess, more crucial than marksmanship or fieldcraft. He had once waited 18 hours for a single shot, lying in his own waste rather than move and compromise the mission. Today, he waited only 40 minutes before the drones moved on to search other sectors. His third shot came from a position the aliens had already searched and dismissed. A warrior from Team 5 dropped as Jackson's bullet found the narrow gap in the creature's helmet, right where the armor plate met the transparent visor. The alien's enhanced vision system registered the incoming projectile for exactly 0.003 seconds before the round ended its ability to register anything at all. By now, the alien ground commander had realized they faced something unprecedented. The attacks showed a pattern that suggested detailed knowledge of alien anatomy and armor systems. The shots were coming from impossible ranges, and The shooter was moving through terrain that should have been impenetrable to anything larger than a howler monkey. "Sir," Vextar's voice carried a note of uncertainty that would have been impossible in any previous campaign. "We need reinforcements. This enemy fights unlike anything in our tactical databases." Vexval's response was predictable for a commander who had never faced an enemy that refused to stand and fight according to established doctrine. "Negative. You have 44 warriors with the finest equipment in the galaxy. Find this primitive human and eliminate him." What Vexval didn't understand was that Jackson Reeves had spent 2 decades learning to be the thing that elite warriors feared most. He was the enemy they couldn't see coming, couldn't predict, and couldn't fight using conventional tactics. He was humanity's answer to the question of what happened when raw technology met refined skill and absolute determination. As the sun began to set over the Amazon basin, Jackson settled into his 4th position of the day. Through his scope, he could see the aliens had modified their tactics, moving in smaller groups with overlapping fields of fire. It was a good adaptation, and it would have worked against any conventional enemy. But Jackson wasn't a conventional enemy. He was the reason that humanity's enemies learned to fear the shadows, and the jungle was about to become full of shadows. The 4th alien died at dawn. Jackson had spent the night moving through the canopy like a ghost, using rope systems he'd established during his 6-day reconnaissance to travel above the jungle floor where the aliens' ground-level sensors were concentrated. The creatures below moved with mechanical precision, their formations textbook perfect for conventional warfare, but they were hunting a shadow that existed between their doctrines. Vextar crouched behind the massive buttress roots of a Brazil nut tree, his armor's sensors painting the surrounding jungle in layers of data. Heat signatures, electromagnetic emissions, movement patterns, chemical analysis, everything that should reveal the presence of an enemy combatant. The readouts showed a living ecosystem in perfect harmony, with no indication that death had been stalking them for the past 18 hours. Team leaders report status. Vextar transmitted on the secured channel. Team 2, no contact. No targets identified. Team 6, sector clear. Sensors show no hostile presence. Team 9, continuing sweep pattern. No, the transmission cut off mid-sentence. 1,200 meters away, Team 9's leader had just discovered that human engineering could be devastatingly effective even when it appeared primitive by galactic standards. Jackson's bullet had punched through the alien's cranial armor at the precise angle necessary to bypass both the outer shell and the energy-absorbing inner layer. Jackson didn't wait to confirm a kill. He was already rappelling down to a new position, moving with the fluid efficiency of someone who had turned warfare into an art form. Each movement was calculated, each step planned to minimize noise and environmental disturbance. The alien sensors might be advanced enough to detect energy signatures from orbit, but they couldn't track a human who moved like water through an environment he understood better than the creatures hunting him. Above the canopy, the alien drones swept back and forth in predetermined search patterns, their artificial intelligence programmed to identify threats according to established military doctrine. They searched for energy weapons, technological signatures, vehicle movement, and communication emissions. They found nothing because they weren't programmed to recognize that a man with a rifle could be more dangerous than a squadron of attack fighters. Vexval watched the tactical display with growing frustration. 4 of his elite warriors were dead, and his ground teams had made no progress in identifying the enemy's position, strength, or capabilities. Worse, the pattern of attacks suggested the humans possessed detailed intelligence about alien anatomy and equipment specifications. "Commander," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human military." The message was brief and delivered in the flat, professional tone of military communications. "Consortium forces. You have been engaged by Terran Defense Forces. Withdraw immediately or face escalated response. This is your only warning." Vexval's mandibles clicked with what might have been laughter. "Reply that we do not negotiate with primitives. Continue the operation." What he didn't understand was that the message hadn't been a negotiation. It had been a legal requirement, transmitted to satisfy rules of engagement that the aliens couldn't comprehend. On Earth, there were laws about warfare, protocols that governed how conflicts were conducted even when survival was at stake. The warning had been delivered not because humanity expected surrender, but because even in the face of extinction, humans maintained standards. Jackson received the communication burst through his encrypted radio, a simple sequence of tones that told him the enemy had refused the offer of withdrawal. The rules of engagement were now expanded. He was authorized to employ any means necessary to eliminate the threat. He shifted to a new weapon system. The rifle he'd been using was a precision instrument, perfect for surgical elimination of targets at extreme range. But now Jackson unpacked something that would have been familiar to soldiers from 100 years earlier, an M2 Browning heavy machine gun, modified for his specific requirements. The weapon was ancient by modern standards, purely mechanical, and absolutely devastating when employed by someone who understood its capabilities. Jackson had positioned the weapon during his reconnaissance phase, cached in a hide that overlooked the natural choke point where the alien teams would have to converge. He'd calculated their movement patterns, studied their tactical preferences, and anticipated exactly where they would establish their command post. The aliens had indeed chosen the location Jackson predicted. It offered good visibility, multiple escape routes, and tactical advantages that any military academy would have approved. What it didn't offer was protection from an enemy who had studied the position for 6 days and prepared accordingly. The first burst from the heavy machine gun caught the aliens completely unprepared. The .50 caliber rounds hammered into their formation at 2,800 feet per second, each projectile carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through armor that could deflect energy weapons. The alien shields, designed to disperse plasma and particle beams, were useless against simple metal moving at extreme velocity. 3 aliens dropped in the first 3 seconds. Their armor registered impact damage, but couldn't respond to a threat that existed outside their technological paradigm. The surviving warriors scattered, seeking cover behind trees that exploded into splinters as Jackson continued his methodical fire. All teams, converge on Sector 7. Vextar transmitted. We have located the hostile. But Jackson was already moving again. The machine gun had been pre-positioned with remote firing controls, allowing him to engage the aliens while remaining at a safe distance. By the time the surviving warriors reached the weapon's position, they found only empty jungle and the mechanical apparatus that had delivered death from a distance. The real Jackson was 800 meters away, back to his precision rifle, picking off the aliens who approached the abandoned machine gun position. Each shot was carefully placed, targeting the vulnerable points his intelligence briefings had identified. Joint seams, sensor arrays, weapon cooling vents. Every piece of alien equipment had weaknesses, and Jackson had studied them all. Sergeant Vextar found himself in command of fewer than 30 warriors, facing an enemy that seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. His tactical training told him this was impossible. No single soldier could coordinate attacks from such widely dispersed positions. Logic suggested they faced a large, well-coordinated human military unit. Logic was wrong. As the afternoon sun slanted through the canopy, Jackson prepared for the next phase of his operation. The aliens were adapting to his tactics, becoming more cautious, moving in smaller groups with better coordination. They were learning, which meant he needed to escalate. He accessed his final cached weapons system, explosive devices that had been carefully placed during his reconnaissance phase. Not high-technology smart bombs or guided missiles, but simple mechanical devices that would detonate when the right conditions were met. Tripwires, pressure plates, and timed charges, technologies that predated space travel but remained effective for the simple reason that they exploited physics rather than relying on electronic systems. The first explosion took out Team 11 as they moved through what appeared to be clear ground. The buried charge launched metal fragments in a precisely calculated pattern, turning the jungle floor into a killing zone that their armor couldn't protect against. The alien shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not flying debris moving at explosive velocities. The second explosion caught Team 4 as they attempted to establish overwatch from an elevated position. Jackson had anticipated their choice of high ground and prepared accordingly. The shaped charge brought down enough trees to crush anything beneath them, turning the alien superior technology into scrap metal buried under tons of hardwood. By evening, Vextar commanded fewer than 20 warriors. They had taken positions in a defensive perimeter, their weapons pointing outward at a jungle that seemed to harbor death in every shadow. Their sensors showed nothing. Their thermal imaging revealed only the background heat of a tropical ecosystem. Their electromagnetic detection equipment registered no artificial emissions. And yet their comrades continued to die. Commander, Vextar transmitted to the command ship, request immediate extraction. We cannot locate or engage the enemy. Fexval's response crackled with anger and disbelief. Negative. You are elite warriors of the consortium. You will complete your mission. What Fexval couldn't understand was that his warriors were indeed elite by galactic standards. They had trained for warfare as it was understood throughout the known galaxy. Conflicts between technological civilizations using advanced weapons according to established military doctrine. They had never encountered an enemy that fought like humanity, with improvisation, adaptation, and the willingness to use any tool available to achieve victory. Jackson settled into his final position of the day as darkness began to fall over the Amazon. Through his night vision equipment, simple light amplification technology that was immune to electromagnetic interference, he could see the aliens huddled in their defensive positions. They were waiting for an attack that would never come, preparing for a battle that had already been decided. Because Jackson wasn't planning to attack them. He was planning to disappear into the jungle and let them wonder when death would come calling. Terror, he had learned over 2 decades of warfare, was often more effective than bullets. An enemy who knew they were being hunted, but couldn't identify the hunter, would eventually make mistakes. And when they made those mistakes, Jackson would be waiting. The third day began with silence. Vextar crouched in the defensive perimeter, his armor's power systems humming quietly as they maintained life support and sensor arrays. Around him, the remaining 18 warriors of what had once been the consortium's most elite strike force waited for an enemy that moved like the jungle itself, present everywhere and visible nowhere. They had not slept. Their species didn't require rest in the same cycle as humans, but the constant vigilance was wearing on their psychological conditioning. These were soldiers trained to dominate battlefields through technological superiority and overwhelming firepower. They were not prepared for the creeping dread of being hunted by something they couldn't see or understand. Movement, Sector 4, whispered Private Kextol, his multiple eyes tracking something through the undergrowth. Every weapon in the perimeter swiveled toward the indicated direction. Energy capacitors charged with the distinctive whine of weapons preparing to unleash devastation. Targeting systems locked onto heat signatures, movement patterns, electromagnetic emissions. A jaguar emerged from the vegetation, paused to study the strange metal creatures invading its territory, then patted away with feline indifference. Stand down, Vextar ordered, but he could hear the tension in his own voice. This was the 14th false alarm since dawn. His warriors were beginning to see enemies in every shadow, threats in every movement of the living jungle around them. 3 kilometers away, Jackson observed the aliens through binoculars from a hide he'd constructed in the canopy of an emergent tree that rose above the general force level. He'd been watching them for 6 hours, studying their defensive positions, noting their patrol patterns, analyzing their psychological state through their body language and movement patterns. They were afraid, not just cautious or alert, but genuinely frightened by an enemy they couldn't locate or engage according to their training. Fear was a weapon Jackson had learned to use with surgical precision, and these aliens were beginning to understand why humans had developed so many words for different types of terror. Jackson's radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from his handler. The message was brief. Status report. Command needs assessment of enemy capabilities for fleet engagement planning. Jackson keyed his response. Enemy ground forces neutralized by 70%. Remaining units, defensive posture, degraded combat effectiveness. Recommend orbital engagement with confidence. What Jackson didn't say was that he was running low on ammunition. 2 days of precision shooting had exhausted most of his carefully rationed rounds. The aliens didn't know this, and their fear was now doing more work than his rifle. Aboard the command ship, Fexval studied the tactical display with growing unease. His strike teams had been reduced to a single defensive position, had made no progress toward their objectives, and appear to be pinned down by an enemy force of unknown size and composition. Worse, the humans' demonstrated capabilities suggested they possessed military technology far beyond what consortium intelligence had indicated. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "recommend we deploy the reserve companies. Clearly the humans have more forces in the area than anticipated." Thexval's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The logical explanation was that his initial strike force had encountered a prepared defensive position with significant human military assets. No single soldier could have inflicted such casualties on elite consortium warriors. The pattern of attacks suggested multiple coordinated units with sophisticated equipment and detailed intelligence about alien capabilities. Negative, Thexval decided. We maintain orbital position. If the humans have significant forces in that jungle, we'll force them to reveal themselves. The orbital bombardment began at noon. Jackson felt the first blast wave roll through the jungle like an earthquake. Trees that had stood for centuries vanished in pillars of superheated plasma that turned wood into vapor and earth into glass. The aliens were sterilizing the battlefield, removing the cover and concealment that had allowed Jackson to operate with impunity. He moved faster than he had since the operation began, flowing through the canopy as the jungle exploded around him. Each blast created a crater 50 meters across, and the orbital gunners were working in a systematic pattern designed to eliminate all possible hiding places within a 10-kilometer radius. The surviving aliens watched the bombardment with relief. Finally, their technological superiority was being brought to bear against the enemy. Whatever human forces were operating in the area would be reduced to component atoms by the precision orbital strikes. But Jackson wasn't hiding in the areas being bombarded. During his reconnaissance phase, he'd identified several locations that would provide protection against orbital bombardment. Cave systems, deep ravines, areas where the jungle canopy was thick enough to confuse targeting systems. He'd prepared these positions specifically for this contingency, because any human military planner knew that aliens with orbital capability would eventually resort to bombardment. As the bombardment continued, Jackson worked his way toward the aliens' defensive position. The orbital strikes had eliminated much of the cover between him and his targets, but they had also created something else: chaos. The systematic destruction of the jungle had filled the air with smoke, dust, and electromagnetic interference from the plasma strikes themselves. In that chaos, Jackson moved like a ghost. The first alien died while watching the bombardment. Jackson's knife slipped between armor plates with the precision of someone who had studied the technical specifications and found the one gap that allowed for necessary joint movement. The warrior dropped without a sound, his weapon still trained on distant explosions while death claimed him from behind. Kextol, report, Vextar transmitted. Silence. Private Kextol, respond immediately. The body was found 30 seconds later, and panic rippled through the remaining 17 aliens. The enemy was among them, had somehow penetrated their perimeter during orbital bombardment, had killed one of their number without triggering any alarm systems. Full defensive posture. Vextar ordered. Back-to-back formation, overlapping fields of fire. But Jackson was already gone, melted back into the chaos of the burning jungle. He'd taken Kextol's weapon, an energy rifle that hummed with barely contained power. Jackson had no idea how to operate alien technology, but he understood the basic principles of directed energy weapons. Point the business end at the target and activate the firing mechanism. The stolen weapon spoke with a voice of thunder, sending a bolt of superheated plasma into the alien formation. 3 warriors dropped as the energy tore through their armor, which was designed to deflect such attacks from the front, not from the side at close range. The return fire was immediate and devastating, turning Jackson's firing position into molten slag. But he was already moving again, using the aliens' own weapons and tactics against them. Each shot drew return fire that revealed their positions, and each revealed position became a target for Jackson's conventional weapons. "Commander," Vextar's voice carried genuine desperation now. "Request immediate extraction. We are being overrun." Thexval stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The orbital bombardment had sterilized thousands of acres of jungle, eliminating any possible enemy positions. His remaining ground forces should have been in complete control of a dead landscape. Instead, they were reporting continued casualties from an enemy that shouldn't exist. Impossible, he muttered. No ground force could survive orbital bombardment and maintain offensive capability. But his sensors told a different story. 14 warriors remained operational. 13. 12. As afternoon faded into evening, Jackson prepared for the final phase of his operation. The aliens had clustered into a tight defensive formation, their weapons pointed outward in all directions. They were expecting an attack from the perimeter, anticipating conventional military tactics. Instead, Jackson attacked from below. The tunnel system he'd prepared during reconnaissance allowed him to emerge directly in the center of the alien formation. The first the aliens knew of his presence was when shaped charges detonated beneath their feet, sending metal fragments upward through the gaps in their armor, where protection was necessarily limited to allow for foot movement and ground contact. 6 aliens dropped in the first explosion. The survivors turned their weapons inward, trying to engage an enemy who was already among them, firing at a target that moved with inhuman speed and fluidity through their formation. Jackson's combat knife found gaps in armor plating that alien engineers had never expected an enemy to exploit. His stolen energy weapon spoke again, and again, each shot precisely placed to maximize damage while minimizing his exposure to return fire. In 40 seconds of close-quarters combat, the remaining aliens died. Sergeant Vextar was the last to fall, his multiple eyes meeting Jackson's gaze for a moment that seemed to stretch into infinity. In that instant, the alien understood that he had been killed not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by a single human warrior who fought with skills that couldn't be programmed into any computer or replicated by any machine. Jackson stood alone among the alien dead, breathing hard from exertion and adrenaline. Around him, the jungle smoldered from orbital bombardment, and the air tasted of smoke and burned vegetation. He keyed his radio one final time. "Control, this is Ghost. Ground units neutralized. Battlefield is yours." Above him, Fexval stared at his tactical display in horror. 47 elite warriors, the finest soldiers in the consortium arsenal, had been eliminated by what appeared to be empty jungle. His orbital bombardment had destroyed thousands of acres of forest and found nothing but trees and animals. The humans had done something impossible. They had won a battle without revealing their true strength, had defeated a technologically superior force using weapons and tactics that shouldn't have been effective against Galactic standard military equipment. For the first time since the invasion began, Commander Thexval felt something he had never experienced in 2 decades of warfare: doubt. If humans could do this in their jungle, what would they be capable of when the real war began? The command ship's bridge fell silent as the last life sign from the ground team winked out on the tactical display. 47 elite warriors, equipped with the finest technology the consortium could provide, had been systematically eliminated by an enemy that had never appeared on their sensors. Thexval stood motionless before the holographic display, his compound eyes processing information that his military training told him was impossible. A single human soldier, for the intercepted communications had made it clear there was only one, had destroyed an entire strike force using primitive projectile weapons and tactics that predated galactic civilization. "Sir," his communications officer reported with barely concealed unease, "we're receiving another transmission from Earth Command." The message appeared on the main screen, delivered in the same flat, professional tone as before. "Consortium Command. Your ground forces have been neutralized. You have 12 hours to withdraw beyond Earth's orbital perimeter. Failure to comply will result in engagement of your fleet." This time, Fexval didn't respond with laughter. The humans had just demonstrated capabilities that called into question everything the consortium believed about primitive species and technological superiority. If they could eliminate a strike force without revealing their positions or capabilities, what other surprises were they preparing? "Tactical analysis," Fexval ordered. "How did they do it?" His senior tactical officer, a methodical Corvin named Dexmar, had been studying the sensor data for the past hour. "Commander, the evidence suggests a single human operative employing what they call asymmetric warfare. No advanced technology was detected. Only kinetic projectiles, explosive devices, and close-quarters combat techniques. Impossible. No single soldier could. Sir, with respect, we have 47 dead warriors that suggest otherwise. Dexmar gestured to the tactical display. The human appears to have used detailed knowledge of our equipment and anatomy, combined with superior fieldcraft and what can only be described as tactical genius. Fexval's mandibles clicked in frustration. One primitive human cannot defeat 47 consortium warriors. Commander, Dexmar replied quietly, one primitive human just did. On the ground, Jackson Reeves sat among the alien dead, methodically cleaning his weapons and preparing for extraction. The jungle around him bore the scars of orbital bombardment, but nature was already beginning the process of reclaiming the devastated areas. Insects buzzed through the smoky air, and somewhere in the distance, a howler monkey called to its troop. Jackson's radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from Director Chun. Ghost, this is Control. Sitrep, Control, objective complete. 47 enemy Kia, 0 friendly casualties. Enemy demonstrated orbital bombardment capability, but showed poor tactical adaptation to unconventional warfare. Assessment. They're dangerous in open battle, but vulnerable to asymmetric tactics. Copy, Ghost. Intelligence indicates enemy fleet is debating withdrawal. Your demonstration has achieved strategic objectives beyond mission parameters. Jackson smiled grimly as he packed his gear. The mission had never been about killing aliens, though that had been necessary. The real objective had been to send a message that humanity would not go quietly into extinction and that their enemies would pay a price for every inch of Earth they claimed. 3 days later, the message was received throughout the Galactic Consortium. Fleet Commander Zexthal of the 3rd Battle Group studied the tactical reports with growing unease. The human defeat of the Amazon Strike Force had been reported to all consortium military units, along with detailed analysis of human capabilities and tactical doctrines. They call it guerrilla warfare, his intelligence officer reported. The humans have refined these techniques over thousands of years of conflict. They use superior knowledge of local terrain, unconventional tactics, and precision strikes against vulnerable targets to defeat numerically and technologically superior forces. Zexthal examined the holographic display showing Earth's defensive preparations. But they have shown us only one soldier. Surely this was an exceptional individual, not representative of their general military capability. Sir, intelligence suggests otherwise. Humans call individuals like this one special operations forces. They apparently train thousands of such soldiers, and their regular military forces are taught similar tactics. The human who eliminated our strike team may be exceptional, but he is not unique. The strategic implications were staggering. If humanity could field thousands of soldiers capable of such feats, if their regular forces employed similar tactics, then the invasion would not be the swift conquest the consortium had anticipated. Recommendations? Zexthal asked. Orbital bombardment of major population centers, followed by robotic occupation forces. Minimize ground engagement with human forces until their capability can be fully assessed. But even as they spoke, reports were coming in from other sectors of the invasion force. Human resistance was appearing everywhere, often in forms that consortium doctrine had never anticipated. In the Sahara, an alien patrol had vanished without trace, leaving only equipment signatures and no indication of what had eliminated them. In the Himalayas, another strike team had reported heavy casualties before communications were lost. In the Arctic, a reconnaissance unit had detected human activity, but had been unable to engage targets that seemed to appear and disappear like phantoms. The pattern was always the same. Human forces that refused to engage in conventional battle, that struck from unexpected directions using weapons and tactics the aliens couldn't predict or counter. Admiral Thakvar, overall commander of the consortium invasion fleet, convened an emergency council of his senior officers. The reports from all sectors painted a picture that challenged everything they understood about primitive species and technological warfare. The humans are not fighting according to established military doctrine, Thakvar announced to the assembled commanders. They appear to have developed an entirely different approach to warfare, one that minimizes their technological disadvantages while exploiting knowledge we did not know they possessed. Sir, interjected Commander Yexdal of the Second Fleet. Surely their resistance is merely delaying the inevitable. Once we commit to full orbital bombardment, the inevitable, Thakvar interrupted, has become rather less certain. Intelligence now indicates that the humans have detailed knowledge of our ship designs, our weapon systems, and our tactical preferences. The question is not whether we can destroy their planet. We clearly can, but whether we can do so before they inflict unacceptable casualties on our forces. The chamber fell silent. For the first time since the invasion began, Consortium commanders were confronting the possibility that a primitive species might actually pose a threat to their military supremacy. Furthermore, Thakvar continued. We have received intelligence reports that the humans have been preparing for this conflict for some time. Their resistance is not improvised. It appears to be part of a comprehensive defensive strategy that assumes technological inferiority and plans accordingly. In the Amazon basin, Jackson Reeves had disappeared as completely as if he had never existed. His extraction had been carried out by teams that left no trace of their presence, using techniques that ensured the aliens would find no evidence of human capabilities beyond what they had already witnessed. But across the globe, other operators like Jackson were moving into position. Men and women whose names existed only in classified files, whose skills had been honed in conflicts the general population never knew had occurred. They were the shadows that democratic governments officially denied employing, the necessary monsters that stood between civilization and chaos. The aliens had expected to fight an army. Instead, they were about to discover what it meant to be hunted by an entire species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing. Director Sarah Chan stood in the Strategic Command Center beneath the Pentagon, watching as reports flowed in from around the globe. The initial phase of humanity's defensive strategy was proceeding exactly as planned. The aliens had been forced to confront the reality that their technological superiority meant nothing if they couldn't locate their enemies. Phase 2 authorization, asked General Martinez, her senior military advisor. Chen studied the tactical displays for a long moment. The alien fleet remained in Earth orbit, apparently debating their next move. Intelligence suggested they were reconsidering their invasion plans in light of the unexpected resistance they had encountered. Authorized, Chen replied. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. Around the globe, humanity's real military forces began to move. The demonstrations were over. The war was about to begin in earnest. Admiral Thakvar received the first reports of Phase 2 at 0347 ship time, as he reviewed intelligence briefings about human military capabilities. The initial transmission came from Fleet Captain Mordex of the 4th Escort Group, positioned in high orbit above the North American continent. Admiral, we're detecting multiple energy signatures launching from the planetary surface. Trajectoire indisat orbital intercept course. Thakvar's attention snapped from the intelligence reports to the tactical display. Dozens of contact signatures were rising from Earth's surface, their flight paths clearly intended to engage the consortium fleet. But the energy readings were wrong. Too small for effective anti-ship weapons, too numerous for humanity's supposed technological limitations. Classification of incoming ordnance. Thakvar demanded. Unknown, sir. Energy signatures suggest primitive chemical propulsion, but the guidance systems appear sophisticated. Estimated time to intercept, 14 minutes. 14 minutes later, humanity taught the Galactic Consortium a lesson about technological assumptions. The weapons rising from Earth were indeed chemically propelled, relying on controlled explosions to achieve orbital velocity rather than the antimatter drives that powered Consortium ships. But they carried warheads that the aliens had never encountered. Nuclear devices designed not to destroy through explosive force, but to disrupt electronics through electromagnetic pulse. The first detonation occurred 50 kilometers from the 4th Escort Group. The alien sensors registered the nuclear explosion as a failed attack. The warhead had detonated too far away to cause physical damage to their heavily armored ships. What they didn't immediately understand was that the explosion hadn't been intended to destroy them. The electromagnetic pulse that followed the detonation swept through space at the speed of light, penetrating the aliens' energy shields as if they didn't exist. The shields were designed to deflect physical particles and energy beams, not the invisible wave of electromagnetic disruption that now washed over the consortium fleet. Every piece of electronic equipment aboard the 4th Escort Group simultaneously experienced catastrophic failure. Navigation systems crashed, weapon targeting computers went dark, life support systems switched to emergency backup power, and communication arrays fell silent. In the space of 30 seconds, the most advanced military vessels in the galaxy had been reduced to floating metal shells. Fleet Captain Mordex, report status, Thakvar transmitted. Silence. All ships, 4th Escort Group, respond immediately. Still nothing. On his tactical display, Thakvar watched as the 4th Escort Group's ships began to drift out of formation, their positions indicating loss of powered flight and maneuvering capability. Sir, his tactical officer reported with barely concealed alarm. The 4th Group appears to have lost all communication and navigation capability. Ships are showing signs of complete systems failure. Before Thakvar could respond, the second wave of human missiles reached their targets. This time, the weapons struck the 2nd Battle Group, positioned above the Asian continent. Again, the nuclear detonations occurred at what seemed like ineffective range. Again, electromagnetic pulses swept through space, turning advanced alien technology into expensive debris. How many ships have we lost? Thakvar demanded. None destroyed, sir, but 23 vessels showing complete systems failure. No communication, no maneuvering capability, minimal life support. Thakvar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The humans hadn't destroyed his ships. They had done something worse. They had turned them into helpless targets, floating in space with crews alive, but powerless to fight or flee. Analysis. How are they doing this? His chief science officer, a methodical Vorthan named Klexpa, had been studying the sensor data from the attacks. Admiral, the humans appear to be using electromagnetic pulse weapons. The nuclear detonations create massive electromagnetic fields that disrupt electronic systems. Impossible. Our shields should deflect any form of energy attack. Sir, electromagnetic fields are not blocked by particle shields. The pulse penetrates our defensive systems because our shields are not designed to stop this type of weapon. The implication struck Thakvar like a physical blow. The humans had developed weapons specifically designed to exploit a vulnerability that the consortium had never considered. Their primitive understanding of nuclear physics had led them to a discovery that galactic civilization had overlooked, that the same electromagnetic fields that powered their technology could be turned into weapons. Countermeasures? He asked desperately. Unknown, sir. We have no experience with this type of attack. Our systems are not hardened against electromagnetic interference because we have never encountered it as a weapon. As if to emphasize the point, the 3rd wave of human missiles reached their targets. The 1st strike group, positioned above Europe, joined their companions in technological paralysis. Their crews remained alive, but helpless, watching through viewports as their ships drifted powerlessly through space. On the ground, Director Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Status of orbital assets. 61 enemy ships disabled. No losses to our forces. The aliens appear to have no countermeasures for EMP weapons. The electromagnetic pulse missiles had been humanity's backup plan, developed during the years when diplomatic contact made it clear that invasion was inevitable. Human scientists had studied the captured alien technology provided by sympathetic consortium dissidents, identifying the crucial vulnerability that would allow primitive Earth to strike back at galactic civilization. Phase 3, asked General Martinez. Chen nodded. Execute. Above Earth's atmosphere, the disabled consortium ships detected new energy signatures rising from the planet's surface. This time, the humans weren't launching missiles. They were launching spacecraft. The ships that rose to meet the crippled alien fleet were crewed by galactic standards, powered by chemical rockets, and fusion drives that belonged to an earlier technological era. But they carried something the aliens had never encountered. Humans who had grown up dreaming of space warfare, who had spent decades planning for exactly this moment. Commander Sarah Park drifted through the airlock of the consortium vessel CSF Vengeance, her magnetic boots clanging against alien hull plating as she led her boarding team into the ship's interior. The electromagnetic pulse had left the vessel powerless, its crew trapped inside armor that no longer functioned, breathing recycled air from emergency systems. Control, this is boarding team Alpha. We have penetrated the target vessel. No resistance encountered. The alien crew watched in helpless terror as human soldiers moved through their ship, armed with weapons that seemed absurdly primitive but were devastatingly effective in the confined spaces of Starship Corridor. Projectile weapons that fired metal bullets, explosive devices that relied on chemical reactions, combat knives that required nothing more than muscle power to be lethal. Secure the bridge, Park ordered. Engineering, take control of their power systems. Intelligence, I want everything in their computers downloaded before they figure out how to wipe their databases. Within 6 hours, humanity had captured 17 consortium vessels intact, along with their crews, their technology, and, most importantly, their strategic databases. The information contained in the alien computers revealed the true scope of the galactic civilization that had attempted to conquer Earth, and it painted a picture that changed everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. The Galactic Consortium wasn't a unified government ruling 12 advanced species. It was a protection racket that had grown to encompass most of the known galaxy, extracting tribute from weaker civilizations and eliminating those that refused to submit. Humanity wasn't the first species to resist. Dozens of others had tried and failed, their worlds reduced to radioactive slag when they proved too difficult to conquer. But humanity was the first to succeed. Admiral Thakvar sat in his command chair, watching as his invasion fleet was systematically disabled and captured by a species that had achieved interstellar travel barely a century earlier. The reports coming in from his surviving ships painted a picture of complete tactical and strategic failure. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command." Director Chen's face appeared on the main screen, her expression calm and professional despite the magnitude of what humanity had just accomplished. "Admiral Tukvar, I am Director Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Council. Your fleet has been neutralized, and your crews are being treated according to the laws of war as practiced by civilized species." Thakvar's mandibles clicked with confusion. "Laws of war? You speak of rules in combat." "Yes, Admiral. Unlike the Consortium, humanity believes that warfare should be conducted according to ethical principles, even between enemies. Your crews will not be harmed if they do not resist. Your wounded will receive medical attention. Your dead will be treated with respect." The concept was alien to everything Thakvar understood about galactic civilization. War was about dominance, about the strong conquering the weak. The idea that there could be rules, ethical considerations, mercy shown to defeated enemies. It challenged his fundamental understanding of how the universe worked. "What are your terms?" he asked. "Unconditional withdrawal of all consortium forces from Earth space. Cessation of any hostile action against humanity or human interests. In exchange, we will return your disabled ships and crews. And if we refuse..." Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Admiral, you have just experienced what happens when you underestimate humanity. We have demonstrated that your technological superiority means nothing if we choose not to engage you on your terms. Do not force us to show you what we are capable of when we stop showing mercy." Thakvar studied the human leader through the communication link. Behind her calm professionalism, he could sense something that made his species' instinctive understanding of predator and prey relationships trigger warning signals throughout his nervous system. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Consortium fleet. They had done so while showing restraint, while following ethical guidelines that limited their actions even in the face of extinction. The terrifying implication was clear. If this was what humans could accomplish while holding back, what were they capable of when they decided to truly fight? "I accept your terms," Thakvar said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. Never in his career had he surrendered to a primitive species. Never had he encountered an enemy that offered mercy to the defeated. As the Consortium fleet began its withdrawal from Earth orbit, Jackson Reeves stood in a jungle clearing in the Amazon basin, watching alien ships disappear into the star-filled night sky. The man with no call sign had started something that changed the balance of power in the galaxy, proving that sometimes the most primitive tools, skill, determination, and an absolute refusal to surrender could defeat the most advanced technology. Humanity had won its first interstellar war, not through superior weapons or advanced technology, but through the same qualities that had allowed them to survive ice ages, plagues, and countless other threats throughout their history. Adaptability, ingenuity, and the stubborn refusal to go quietly into extinction. In the years that followed, the galaxy would learn what the consortium had discovered in the Amazon basin. That there are some species you simply don't hunt, because sometimes the prey hunts back.